Okay, so while people are still coming in, I'm going to provide the filler and announce the lecturer. Welcome to the second of three lecturers from John Preskill, Director of the Institute for Quantum Information and Matter at Caltech. This is the lecture intended for the general public, which means we have the ritual slideshow. Hans Bethe had already retired when I arrived here as a graduate student in the late 1970s, but he remained a fixture over there in Newman Lab, so I did get to interact with him a bit. I'm going to give my own take on the slides that have been shown here frequently. We start with, he was born in 1906 in Strasbourg, Germany. And I just was pausing here. I have a note to remind everybody to pay attention, because when I ask random undergraduates at Bethe House on the West Campus why it's named after him, they all think he must have been some kind of big donor without realizing that he was a scientist. So that's why we do this. His father's academic position had his family moving around a bit. They ultimately settled in Frankfurt, and he began his higher studies in Frankfurt in 1924. In chemistry, he ultimately switched to physics at the University of Munich, where he completed his doctorate with Arnold Sommerfeld in 1928. This time frame, incidentally, put him among the first of the young scientists to explore applications of the then new quantum theory. This was in the late 1920s. And indeed, at age 24, he wrote a classic article on spectroscopy, one of the first applications of group theory in quantum mechanics. During this period of his late 20s, he went to a few places, including a few places in Germany. He spent some time in Cambridge, UK, and he also spent some time as a visitor in Rome working with Enrico Fermi. So he got to know the major physicists at the time. Things took a downturn when he took a position as assistant professor at the University of Tübingen, but it was government funded, and during an edict that was issued shortly after he arrived, he was forced to be fired due to having Jewish ancestry. And reading the writing on the wall, in 1933, he left Germany for good. While briefly back in England, he was recruited to Cornell, and this is a photo of him. He arrived in 1935. There he is. And this is on the steps of this very building we're in right now. This was before either Clark, of course, or even Newman Lab. We'll see the groundbreaking for that in a moment. And he started at a salary of $3,000 per year, but it instantly put the physics department here on the map. This was before the surge of European physicists that made US physics preeminent after World War II. Within a few years of arriving, he explained how stars burned hydrogen to become helium, starting the field of nuclear astrophysics, and that's work for which he won the Nobel Prize somewhat later in 1967. Now this photo, this is him calculating that odd implement that he's holding. I think was used for astrological purposes, I'm not sure. This photo is the one I worked hard to find. It shows Bethe with Werner Heisenberg. Oh, I'm supposed to be near the mic. And they are discussing the wonderful facility that young physicists have with applied technology. You had to get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. He took a few years of leave from Cornell during World War II to be head of the theoretical division at Los Alamos. He reported to Oppenheimer, who he later supported in testimony in his defense during the, when Oppenheimer had his security clearance removed. Feynman, Richard Feynman, who reported to him during this period, and this I have to read verbatim, described him as, quote, a battleship surrounded by an escort of smaller vessels, the younger theorists, moving majestically forward through the ocean of the unknown. When I was an employee, oh, there he is. When I was an employee at Los Alamos 50 years later, it was no longer anywhere near the ocean, as far as I could tell. Live mic. Okay.